Good day, Lord and ladies. Welcome back to Varney Lake with me, Cornish-Knight, as we deepen into the exploits of the vampire, as we jump back to Act 4 in 1981. 26 years into the future from the point of the young characters. You listen to them talking and you think about the best way to arrange the material for the book. On one hand, you have activities they did during the day, all the things that strengthened them as a group and made the story more human. On the other hand, the first night at the vampires, a dinner that didn't turn out as the vampire had probably expected. You adjust your glasses, a habit almost as old as you. Why are you asking yourself all these questions? At what point had you lost confidence in your writing process? You'd like to write as you used to, one chapter after another, without worrying too much about the structure. Books are nothing more than an act of accumulation, you'd said to one of the prefaces you'd been commissioned to write at some point. Now nobody commissions anything from you. You'd had a hard time finding a publisher for the new book, and to think 10 years ago any non-fiction publisher in the country would have paid astronomical amounts to have you among their authors. So this must have been impacted from the last game, because he was working back then. I think he was a bit younger though. Phew. Finally a good sign. The story of these three kids had made you lose track of time. Would the same thing happen to your future readers? You'll have to excuse me, says Lou. I have to make a phone call. I don't think it would take more than 10 minutes. There's a phone across the street. Jimmy and Kirsty nod. Before you leave, you reach into your pockets. Oh shit. Ask Jim for a quarter, ask Christine for a quarter. Let's ask Christine for a quarter. Let's see. I always have some spare change, in case something happens with my son. It's only a second, but you notice the expression on Christine's face the moment she mentions her son. It doesn't take professional to notice the tension that still exists between these two. Thank you, Christine. I'll be back in 5 minutes. 10 at the most. You know they won't miss you too much. Jimmy and Christine have a lot to talk about. It's raining outside and you think about the concept of the prophetic fallacy. Yeah, that's not a human look. That face isn't human. Was nature mourning the commercial success that your last books didn't achieve? The funny thing is that you don't really care about money, or rather, you're not interested in it as an end in itself. You just see it as a tool that allows you to continue your research and do damage control. You'd made some decisions in your career that you regretted, but you always tried to make up for it. Your heart almost comes out of your mouth. Xantos, you motherfucker, you mutter. You hang up the phone and the coin is returned. I'm sorry, says Xantos. That's not a human face. Did I scare you? You let the air out of your mouth. Although you've seen many things over the years, terrible things, unimaginable for some, you can't deny that Xantos has indeed frightened you. What happened? Why did you leave the diner? Xantos seems nervous, and he doesn't need to tell you anything for you to know what's wrong with him. Go. With 10 minutes tops. You go back to the booth and dial Lee's number. Lee's is Xanatos' adoptive father, and your friend, you might say. You feel responsible for everything that had happened to him. After all, Lee was the one of the main characters in your book about the Mothman and the 1966 meteor shower. Yeah, this is the previous game. So that's the Oh, it's the Goat Kid. If you play Mothman and the Mothman 1966, I won't spoil it, but there's basically the character you see, Xantos, is basically from that story. The phone rings. Think about the night of 1966. Since that fateful night in late November 1966, Lee could feel the effects of every possible present at once. It's hard for you to imagine something like that. To feel each and every possible present as if they had happened. What impact would this have on a person? It was not a superpower, but that much is clear. It was a curse. Lee's relationship with Victoria, whom he had married 3 months before their daughter was born, had deteriorated in recent years. Feeling all those presents where Victoria had lied to him, insulted him, cheated on him, belittled him, or worse, had been too much for Lee. And that was why he had moved to the other end of the country, and only you have his number. So that's the character from the previous game. It's a shame that they broke up. But if the pressure of knowing all the things that went on, Lou, how many presents will there be where it's not you on the other end of the phone, but someone else? Could these presents be quantified, enumerated for analysis? You shake your head, trying to concentrate on the conversation, and to stop thinking about all the possible ramifications of every act, no matter how small it may have. Did you think I'd forgotten? You say. Lee laughs and starts telling you about the last stories he'd read. Lee is a fan of crime fiction. You had given him several dozen issues of Ellery Queen mystery magazine, and you call him religiously for him to tell you what happened in the stories he liked the most. Lee needs to talk. He needs to be in contact with another human being. It was the least he could do after ruining his life. What about my son? Is he learning anything? You notice his voice breaks when he mentions Xantos. You tell him he is, but he's helping you observe the people you're interviewing. As if he had been summoned, you see Xanatos walking across the street. You cover the phone with your hand and call him. You say Jimmy's name and makes a gesture for Xanatos to watch him. Xanatos nods and you go back to talking to Lee. I don't want to take anything for granted this time. Lee doesn't respond. But you think you know what he's thinking. Lou? Thank you, says Lee. Before you could say anything else, he hangs up. You hold your head and take a deep breath. You had screwed him up, and he thanks you. You think about the new book, the biography of a very special vampire. Will they be okay when they find out? When they know the whole truth? Christine has a family, but Jimmy, you know how much he suffered. It's impossible to see how he might react. But this isn't a possible present. But isn't there a possible present for any outcome? No. No. The end is always one and only one. And you have to learn to live with that. Jimmy. Act 5. Summer of 1954. You think you exist, and therefore you do. It's nice, isn't it, says Doug. but you'd rather not think, and exist without knowing it. So, says Doug, what are we doing today? Go fishing, go to the market, go to the hill. Let's try and catch that legendary fish. Go fishing. Fish. Oh. You lost it. Oh, it's timed now and it disappears. You lost it. That's annoying. You lost it. This is really hard because this one. How are you supposed to do this? Okay, I see how we're supposed to do it. We can't touch the edge, because if we touch the edge... Okay. So we can't touch the edge. Got something. Whoa. There it is in all its glory. The albino tarpon. Now that's going to have to... Now they're going to have to believe him, says Christine. You look into Christine's eyes. Is she crying? Guys? We've just caught the albino tarpon. The three of you hug and bounce with delight. You feel good, and you suspect it's not just because of the albino tarpon. Creatures from the Black Lagoon, says Christine. You have to see it. It's hard to compete with Christine. House of Wax, Invaders from Mars, The Thing from Another World. It doesn't matter what horror movie it is. She's watched them all. That's not fair, says Doug. Your boyfriend works at the movie theatre. There he is again. Christine's boyfriend. Is it really necessary to mention him so much? You take a deep breath and look up at the sky. The shape of the truck's hood fits perfectly against your back. And you force yourself to smile. Toad, cheese and Doug? Is that you say? Doug raises his eyebrows and starts making noises with his mouth. Can't contain your laughter. You're disgusting, says Christina. Doug laughs too, with a hoarse laughter almost as if he was choking. You remember that afternoon of the last summer very well. Doug had gotten vinyl record he was obsessed with. You'd seldom seen him like that, and now he's insisted that you listen to it. The record was part of a collection documenting the sounds of the world, everything from distant cultures to meteorological phenomena. Doug wasn't particularly interested in the collection, but this record, it was special. It included recordings of toads singing in the middle of mating season. "Could you please stop?" says Christine. Christine's anger only makes you laugh harder. Doug finally stops imitating the toads. The laughter gradually fades away and ends up turning into a sustained sigh. You look at your friend and think about what he confessed to you that afternoon. It's always sad that neither of you had older siblings or a father figure to lean on. That vinyl record with its songs and toads during mating season was the closest thing Doug had to a Playboy. "What's that?" says Doug. "On that branch. You see?" "A bat, you say? Where?" The bat soars into the air with a loud screech. "Come here," says Doug. "We know it's you." "How long have you been up there?" says Christine. "You're not following us, are you?" "I told you," says the vampire. "I am indebted to you." "See," mutters Christine. "He's a freak." "Wait a minute," says Doug. "Brandon stopped bothering us, right?" "So," says Jimmy. "Are we good?" Vampire nods. You can't deny that his presence at the drive-in bothers you a little. The drive-in is something for the three of you. The only child's club. "The only child's club?" says the vampire. The question takes you by surprise. Wasn't that what Christine had said? That the vampire could read your minds? "I'm an only child too," says the vampire. "Or at least that's what I thought," he muttered. There's something in his eyes that forces you to pay attention, a sadness that you can relate to. And considering Doug and Christine's silence, you could swear they're feeling something similar. "How did you become a vampire?" "How does someone turn into a vampire?" says the vampire. He puts his hand on his jugular and remains silent. "Is he really an only child?" The vampire tells you that he believed so for most of his life, raised by a strong mother and an older gentleman, but after the conversation he had discovered that he was born on the other side of the Atlantic, and that he had a twin brother. However, his original family had given him to a couple who couldn't have children, and who were able to immigrate to the United States. "Isn't that tragic?" says the vampire. He's been bitten by something. The thing is that in Mothman, which is their previous title, this is more like Cthulhu-esque than it is supernatural. Well, it's supernatural, but it's more Cthulhu-esque, which is like star horror rather than sort of fantasy horror. So he could be basically something from beyond the stars rather than something like Dracula. "Two brothers separated at birth," says the vampire, and turned into two only childs. What's your real name?" The vampire says that his name's not important, but that you can call him Litz. The vampire just told you to call him Litz. After listening to him, you can't deny he had suffered just as much as the three of you. What will the others say? Will they give Litz a chance to prove himself as a new member of the club? Xantos. Chapter 6. autumn of 1981. So this is the character. This is someone that you only meet very briefly right at the end of the last game. Lou calls it goat Tetris. Goat Tourette's. You know he doesn't mean it in a bad way. As well as being your godfather, Lou is a writer. And sometimes writers use words like shortcuts. Your mum didn't like it when Lou said goat Tourette's. You had read about Tourette's, and you understood the comparison. Doctors call the tension in a muscle group that the individual with Tourette's relieves with motor tics, a premonitory urge. Your case is different. The urgency is not focused on a specific muscle group, but rather in the whole of your being. With every kick, every jump, every blow, you feel alive, as if all of a sudden the veil were pulled back. Goat Tourette's is what allows you to bear being unable to show yourself to the world as you really are, as you were when your parents and your godfather found you that night in 1966. Goat Tourette's is the way you found to forgive yourself, at least for a little while. Okay. So we had to do it quickly enough. It's not the first time this happens to you. A ruthless disconstruction of one's automated actions. How does one lift a foot? How does jumping work? And crouching? What are the steps to take when crouching? Let's try again. Okay, that's not right. Not the first time, okay. Okay. Like I said, we had to do it quickly enough or when it's green. Okay, that's not right. When it's green. There we go. The spasmodic movements released you accumulated tension, and for a moment you feel the veil being lifted. I'm Xanatos, son of Victorian Lee, godson of Lou. And I am a goat man. You breathe a sigh of relief, but you know the sensation won't last long and you still have things to do. You wonder if Lou made the right choice in selecting you for the job. Xanatos, private detective. You hope to one day have your own sign on the door of an office downtown. But it's still a long way off. You nod to Lou and walk back into the Nikia Cafe. You're just starting, and for now your tasks are pretty simple. Lou asked you to watch Jimmy and Christine during the interview, and to follow Jimmy after the meeting. Your godfather has told you that after telling them the truth, anything could happen, and that you had to be very careful with the consequences of their actions. And you? Wasn't that what you were? A consequence of their actions. Christine, Act 6. No, not 6, Act 7. Summer 1954. The raindrops pound the roof, and you have to speak loudly to be able to hear each other. It's really coming down out there. Why does he feel the need to talk all the time? When you have nothing to say, you just stay quiet. It's really coming down out there. And why describe what everyone can already see? You stretch a bit. Do we have to go back then? Both of them nod. Jimmy seems like he's going to say something else, but ultimately changes his mind. Another of his astute observations. Your legs dangle from the platform. A gentle breeze caresses your arms, and you sigh. You wonder what you'll remember of this 10 years from now. And in 20? In 25? Let me think a little, says Doug. You look at your cousin. Since the night you started hanging out with the vampire at the drive-in, the dynamics of Only Child's Club have changed. Doug spends most of his time with Letts. And now that you have more space for just the two of you, Jimmy seems to have closed in on himself. Talk about Doug, talk about Letts, talk about Maggie, talk about the boyfriend. Let's talk about Doug. I like my cousin's games, as you say. But I don't know. I always feel there's something missing. You regret what you said as soon as the words leave your mouth. Out of everything you could have said about Doug, why choose that? Something like what, says Jimmy. Give an example. The 10 solitaire, for example. The solitaire? There's a trick to make Super 10 with 0 effort. Jimmy opens his eyes wide. The first thing you have to do is to add up the cards of each colour on the board. Let's suppose that the black cards add up to 31 and the reds come to 38. Take 31 from 38 and you're left with 7. 7 in favour of red. Once you know that, the only thing left to do is flip the cards from the deck until you get a red 3. And when that happens, you put it all down. The red 3 plus the 38 red cards on the table add up to 41. 41 minus 31 of all the black ones, 10. Whoa. Why did you tell Jimmy about the trick? Shouldn't you have talked to Doug first? Given him a chance to improve the solitaire? You don't want to admit it, but finding mistakes in your cousin's creations gives you a certain confidence. It's not just the satisfaction of finding someone else's mistakes. It's something else. Something you didn't want to think about too much. Talk about Letts. Do you think what Les said about the games is true? I'm sorry, what? Ask again. Jimmy raises his shoulders. He looks like he wants to say something but regrets it. I don't know if it's true, but I think it makes sense. I've always wondered about the origins of certain board games. To think they're an advanced society's experiment to study us. It seems more credible than the idea that a random person could have designed something like chess. Talk about Maggie. Did you talk to Maggie? Says Jim. If you talk to Maggie, Jimmy looks at you for a few seconds and finally looks down. She called by to give my mum something. That's it. Is that's it annoys you? As if Jimmy thinks he owes you an explanation. Talk about your boyfriend. Talk about that. Yeah, okay. My boyfriend got me Rocco Brownie's autograph. repeat what you said. No, let's just be quiet with that. Never mind. Jimmy scratches his head. You wonder what he's thinking. Fuck, mutters Doug. Mate and four, says Litz. Forced. They finally finished the game. You don't know how much more you could take. You stand up and smooth out your pants. Doug starts picking up the pieces. One more? Says the vampire. No, that's enough for today. Why don't you tell us one of your stories? Litz nods and you get ready to listen. Which story would you like to hear? Godfrey the Glue Maker, Gilbert the Lumberjack, Milo the Thief. Gilbert the Lumberjack. I'll tell you the story of Gilbert the Lumberjack. Gilbert wielded an axe as few others could. He lived a nomadic life dedicated exclusively to work. Carpenters and builders adored him. One day, while chopping at a very thick oak tree, Gilbert heard a groan. He pressed his ear to the trunk. Could the tree be complaining? He removed the axe from the trunk and swung it again. There was no doubt there was a groan again. Confused, he dropped the axe and paused to think for a few minutes. Gilbert did not particularly like his job, but it was the only thing he knew how to do. He had estimated that if he kept doing it for 5 more years, he could retire and live in one of those small towns he had passed by. Determined to follow through with his plans, he picked up the axe and ignored the groans of the oak tree. But from that day on, Gilbert began to hear the sobs of all the trees he felled. Oaks, pines, firs, beeches, they all suffered under the lumberjack's axe. Although it wasn't easy for him, Gilbert learned to ignore the whining. It was the only way he could keep working. 5 years later, Gilbert retired. He settled in a village, and soon after met Estrid, whom he married. Estrid was slender and frail-looking. Gilbert loved her deeply. Before long, the young woman contracted an illness that left her bedridden. She lay on her bed all day long, and Gilbert brought her tea and sung to her. Estrid grew weaker every day until one afternoon an attack of withering pain foretold her end. The woman kept writhing, crying and moaning loudly. Meanwhile, Gilbert was in the courtyard of the house, and although he could hear her, he kept carving, without ever blinking, the figures of 2 lovers melting into a kiss on a spring of oak. You try to imagine Esther's last hours, and you feel sick. Do you want another story? Godfrey the Glue Maker. This is the story of Godfrey the Glue Maker. Godfrey was a glue maker. He made glue from horses' bones and hooves. He wasn't the best animal glue in the region, but he'd been very lucky. He sold the glue to a famous bookbinder in town. However, whilst he had built a very lucrative business, Godfrey had not been able to find love. He was a romantic, a true believer in the concept of the other half. One afternoon, crouched under the dead body of a young foal he had brought from a widow, he had an idea. After shaking the dirt off it, the animal had fallen off a cliff and crushed its owner. He cut off the horse's tail with a pair of big scissors and stood up and approached a mirror. He raised the horse's tail behind his head, and he liked what he saw. It was a new Godfrey, younger, healthier even, with long silky hair. It did not take much to make up his mind. Didn't he make animal glue for a living? A few weeks later, and with renewed confidence, Godfrey met the beautiful Isolde, a young woman who ended up being his wife and whom he loved fervently. One day, while Godfrey was in his workshop working on hanging a carcass, Isolde approached him from behind. She was smiling from ear to ear, as she had great news to give to her husband. But the moment she touched his back, something strange happened. Godfrey's shoulders dislocated with a wet crack, and both arms suddenly shot back, as if powered by strong pistons. The hit landed on her chest. Godfrey turned around and saw Isolde on the floor, her eyes wide open. He ran to her and to her found she was dead. He burst into tears. His face rested on the sealer's chest. Godfrey cried for a long time, unable to move. And his tears moistened the ends of the horsetail he had glued to his head almost a year ago. Whoa. You look at Doug. Doug looks at you and nods. Another story? Milo the Thief. Milo the Thief. Milo was on the run. He had robbed the shopkeeper and was chased to the entrance of the forest. The chase didn't stop there, and an hour later, when the sun finally set, Milo was sure he wouldn't be caught. Without letting up his pace and always stretching his arms forward to avoid hitting a tree, Milo continued on into the darkness of the forest. After walking for a while, the thief ran into a jagged wall, and almost at the same time he heard a growl closer than he would have liked. Surely he couldn't have managed to escape from the soldiers only to end up being eaten by a bear. With his hands resting on the wall, he looked for a foothold so he could clamber up. He was shaken, but the effect was worth it. The thief found the entrance to a small cave through which the animal would not fit. He crawled through the darkness, and then, too exhausted to do anything else, he fell asleep. Milo awoke with the first light of morning. He looked inside and noticed that the cave was deeper than he had thought the night before. He squatted down and moved forward until he reached a gallery where he could finally stretch out. He couldn't believe his luck. It was a perfect hiding spot, not just from the bear but from the town authorities. He looked around and noticed a group of mushrooms that had grown on a kind of mound. He approached and plucked one. His belly was rumbling. Without thinking too much, he took a bite. He was surprised by his own recklessness, but it tasted so good. He took a second bite. His legs went slack. He fell to the ground, writhing in pain. He tried to crawl to the exit to call for help, but only managed to let out a weak whimpering. At first he felt his body burning, but then he lost all sensation. He was completely paralysed by the toxins. Unable to even express horror on his face, Milo watched as the mound of earth seemed to move. It was not dirt, but a strange creature with a colourful mushroom growing on its back. The creatures advanced a few feet towards Milo and began to writhe, giving birth to a dozen translucent skins, shapeless offspring that began to crawl, opening and closing their mouths, and Milo, unable to even close his eyes or move his head to the other side, watched the hideous creatures slowly swell as they ate him alive. You didn't quite know what to think. Was there a teaching to Milo's story? Thou shalt not steal? Curiosity killed the cat? Personally, you like stories where the line between good and evil is a little bit fuzzier. One more? Say no. It's getting late. Says Christina. Doug asks one more and looks at Jimmy. Christina's right, says Jimmy. Doug starts croaking like a toad, and you pretend not to hear him. Back to Lou in Chapter 7 in autumn 1981. Let's enjoy telling those stories, says Christine. There was something about the way he moved his hands, the way he projected his voice, and his shadow. It looked like, I don't know, like he could control the darkness around him. Christine shifted in her chair, but his most striking feature were his eyes. Yeah, there was something about the way he looked at you that took you to the very heart of his stories. Old man, is it you? He says. The couple look at you in silence. They expect you to say something. When was the last time something like this happened? If that's me? The old couple smile, and something snaps inside you. You tell them you're not that person. You're not the author of... Please, I'm busy, says Lou. You hear the old man tut as he walks away. He holds a copy of his book. He's holding a copy of the book you obviously recognise. Rising by Falling Star. with the subtlety your editor had added and you never really liked, the secret story of the cryptids wars. You even remember the text on the dust jacket. Raisin by Falling Stars by Lou Hill features exclusive first-person reports on the last battle of the Cryptid Wars in 1966. Raisin by Falling Stars had sold more than 100,000 copies. Christine coughs and you apologise. The smiles of the old couple stick with you. Where were those smiles when you realised your last book and when you released your last book and couldn't sell the minimum required by your publisher? Where were we? You say. Jimmy. Chapter 8. Summer of 1954. Varney Lake. You know that if you lived here it wouldn't be the same, but all this has value because it has an end. Christine takes out her notebook. As much as you remember this summer for being the one you met an honest-to-God real-life vampire, you'll also remember it for being the one you caught the albino tarpon. But does it matter? You'll see your friends smile, and you can't help but copy them. You'd like to tell them how much you love them, but you feel embarrassed. Will you be brave tonight? You don't understand. Why is it so hard to talk to her? But maybe it's not your fault. Maybe you never really had the choice. Like every year, all the kids gather at the beach on the beach on the lake to watch the fireworks. The explosions of colour in the sky mark the end of summer. Even though you try to smile, you find it hard to hide the pit you've been feeling in your stomach for the last few days. The simple realisation that nothing lasts forever. How many times those summers like this one will you ever have? Do you hear that? Says Doug. Neither of you say anything. Neither one of you ever says anything. It's the toads. Christine grimaces and looks at you. Doug taps you on the shoulder. He is your friend, that's Croak. Doug bursts into laughter. Yes, Jimmy. Croak. I've just seen Maggie, so go on. Croak like a horny toad. Doug looks down. What's wrong with Christine? She knows her cousin is in love with Maggie. Why would she say something like that? Didn't she talk to you all the time about her boyfriend? Doug kicks a rock. You want to say something, but you see Brandon. He looks lost. You remember end of summer parties of the past, how most kids avoided the place where Brandon and his gang hang out. That Brandon everyone was afraid of. What had Liz done to him to leave him like that? Steve, 1 second, folks. I'm back, folks. Steve, look what we have here. The guys surround Brandon, and Brandon doesn't seem to understand what's about to happen. Bert, whose Brandon once pushed out of a moving car. Tommy, from whom Brandon had stolen a slinky just to wrap around his leg, leaving him with marks that, according to the doctor who treated him, were permanent. Steve, whom Brandon had lifted by the collar of his shirt with one hand and his underpants with the other, to use him as if he were a battering ram to take down his friends while the rest of the gang exploded with laughter. And Tommy, and your friends? Everyone had been talking about it. Without violent and abrasive Brandon, the boys were no longer afraid of them. And none of the other members of the gang would dare to come to the fireworks. But what about Brandon? Why had he come? Fireworks going off. Everything happens too fast. And that moment he hits the ground, everyone starts kicking him. Stop, please, says Christine. You'll see, motherfucker, says Steve. Do you like that, you son of a bitch, says Bert. Each explosion illuminates Brandon's terrified face from a different angle. Look at the big baby crying, says Tommy. Should we call Mummy, says Steve. All right, she'd rather stick her head in the oven than watch you grow up. When the smoke dissipates, Brandon takes a few steps back. Look, says Bert. The guy points and laughing. He pissed his pants. Come on, let's get close to the fireworks, says Tommy. He won't bother anyone anymore. Some spit on him before walking away. Others kick him. None of you move. Brandon looks at you, and you look down at the floor, not quite knowing what to feel. Fireworks mark the end of the summer, and the beginning of something that haunts you to this day. Christine, Chapter 10, Autumn of 1981. Jimmy, why Christine? But I think this is where we're going to put a cut in, folks. I've been Cornish-Knight. This has been Varney Lake, and I shall see you all again next time. Goodbye.